This video is regarding the first update to the game Muck. If you haven't seen my initial video on it or haven't played the game before, I recommend you watch that first. It should be the top link in the description. Okay, now on with the video. A few hours ago, Dani released the first update to Muck on Steam with a download size of 1 MB and the following patch note. Hey everyone, thanks a lot for a pretty insane launch, already 500,000 downloads. I didn't really expect it to blow up so much, so I'll try to update very frequently and keep up with everything. There have been a lot of complaints about balancing, so I've made a couple of changes to mob difficulties, especially Big Chunk. It remains almost unchanged for gamer difficulty, but easy and normal should not be as hard anymore. Big changes: changed item cap from 64 to 69. New respawn system: on death you spawn a grave, can only be used during day. Revive totems allow you to revive teammates without being close to the grave, but comes at a price. Buff enemies can now spawn randomly and will drop better loot. Versus mode / battle royale is now more fast paced, and you gather resources at 2 times the speed. Minor changes: chest prices increase with time, hopefully to balance things out a bit more. Profanity filter: a few streamers have tried the game, and Twitch management, need I say anymore. Free camera when spectating, and displays when stations is in use. Okay, so now you're up to speed with the patch notes. I just want to highlight the fact that Dani has said he's going to be updating the game very frequently, which is great, as like me, many of you said you wanted Dani to update the game, and you thought it would likely turn into a decent game if he did so, and I'm glad to see Dani is on the same page. Now, when referring to balancing, Dani has made the following changes. In easy difficulty, Big Chunk doesn't spawn until the end of the 6th day now, then the 12th day, and then every day after that. In normal difficulty, Big Chunk doesn't spawn until the end of the 5th day, then the 10th day, and every day after that. In gamer difficulty, Big Chunk spawning hasn't been affected by the update, and aside from Big Chunk, the enemies seem to have slightly less health and do slightly less damage in normal difficulty and easy difficulty when compared to gamer difficulty respectively. These changes clearly separate the 3 game modes and allow a wider player base to play the game, which personally I'm glad to see. The new respawn system is also a pretty big change, meaning that any dead players can no longer just respawn every morning like you could previously, but instead upon death will drop a grave on the floor where they died that is automatically pinged to let living players know exactly where it is. Then, during the day, living players can press E on these graves to respawn the dead player. These graves cannot be used at night, and the ping remains on these graves until the player is resurrected, which is good, apart from the fact that it appears to have caused a bug where if the player is resurrected using the other method, which I'll talk about in a second, then the grave ping stays there until the next time that player is resurrected using a grave, which can be slightly annoying to have the ping constantly on your screen. But I'm sure Dani could fix it fairly easily, so not a massive issue. This other method of resurrection is the revive totems, which allow dead players to be resurrected in exchange for coins, where the amount of coins is equal to the price of a grey chest, which now changes depending on the day and difficulty. I'll go into detail on this later in the video. These coins only buy 1 dead player back as well, so if you have more than 1 dead player, they will require an amount of coins each. 2 mini bugs I noticed about the revive totems are: first, the revive totems don't say the player name, but instead Dani EHJAD. I'm almost certain this was just an accident, though it'll likely be fixed by the next update. Second, you can also use revive totems in the versus mode to revive your opponents, although I guess this can kind of be counted as something that isn't a bug, as it could be useful for playing a 2v2 or teamed games within your friends, and even if that wasn't the intention, you have to go out of your way to revive your opponents, so if you don't want to revive them, then just don't do it. One of the other major changes was the addition of buff enemies, which are enemies that have a random chance of spawning and are stronger than normal enemies, and drop more gold and better loot in general. They also seem to spawn in pairs, so if you see one buff enemy, you will likely see another one very soon. One thing worth mentioning in relation to these new buff enemies is that the spawner totems that have been around since the start of the game are still here, but only spawn buff enemies now. And additionally, upon killing the 3 enemies that spawn, now causes the totem to self-destruct and drop a random ability upon being defeated, rather than just turning orange. This then means that there is also a harder version of Big Chunk available to defeat, Buff Big Chunk, which as far as I can tell can only be spawned using spawner totems, which will spawn 3 Buff Big Chunks. The final major change is one that I, in my last video, alongside a few other people suggested, which is that the versus mode is now much more fast-paced due to a few changes. First, resources can now be gathered at 2 times speed compared to other modes. Second, every player has increased stamina. And finally, every player has faster recovering stamina. These 3 changes mean that the versus mode is much more in line with what I was hoping for, where preparing takes roughly 5 minutes and fighting about 1 minute, meaning each game is much more fun and it feels much easier to play multiple versus games in a row, unlike before. Aside from the major changes, there are also a few minor changes. First, chest prices increase with time to balance things out a bit more. It appears to be that after day 3, the prices increase by 20% of the original price each day. The initial prices of the chest have also been changed depending on which game mode you're in. Easy, the grey chest and revive totems initially cost 20 coins each, blue chest initially costs 80 coins, and orange chest initially costs 200 coins. Normal, the grey chest and revive totems initially cost 25 coins each, blue chest initially 100, and orange chest initially 250. Gamer, the grey chest and revive initially 30, blue chest initially 120, 150, and orange initially 300. There is now also a profanity filter, which is useful for Twitch streamers, and a free cam when spectating, meaning you can use your mouse to move the camera when spectating, rather than being stuck looking in one direction. Stations, such as furnaces, workbenches, and anvils, now display when they are in use to other people standing nearby, and finally, you can now use the scroll wheel to change the item you are using in the hotbar. I'd also like to quickly mention that lightning balls, which drop from one of the enemies, don't do any damage when shot out of a bow, which is a bit weird, but Dani probably just didn't notice him. Finally, I'd also like to mention a few things I got wrong in the main video. You can actually play the game on Mac and Linux, you just need to download it on the itch.io page in the description and have Steam open in the background. Thanks 0xa Press for pointing that out. HP of the boss depends on how many players you have, not the difficulty. Thanks Heartcool. Bug where a player is stuck in the lobby can be solved by ensuring everyone is on the same difficulty and settings. Thanks Element. And finally, items do despawn after 2 days. Thanks Mnix. Thanks for watching, and I hope this video was interesting. If you did find it interesting, feel free to subscribe. Alright gamers, peace.